Or says both can claim to be traumatized. It is a weak argument for both sides. I don't know if this is an argument though. Trauma, do people use trauma as an argument? At least the way it's being used now, it's not as an argument. It's more so to have a greater understanding of the challenges we face before us. If we want to understand Israel Palestine and the sentiment of the people and what drives it, trauma is an essential part of that picture. So it can't just be, it shouldn't be avoided altogether. It's not an argument. It's just to better understand the conflict. Or it goes, trauma is weaponized among different groups. That's true. That's true. I think that might even be more popular in the West. You know, in Israel, Palestine, actually people don't talk about trauma too much. In the West, it's very much part of one's identity. It's kind of like oppression, you know, how people make oppression part of their identity. And in many circles, the legitimacy of your words depends on how oppressed you are deemed. So there's almost this incentive mechanism for people to want to be oppressed. People taking on trauma as part of their identity, I think, plays into that. But I do notice, I noticed that out here, you know, since, you know, for those who don't know, I spent the last 14 years of my life in Tel Aviv, Israel. But the past year and a half, I've been primarily in Venice Beach, California, building grateful giraffes. And one thing I noticed that's quite popular out here is how focused people are on their trauma. And I think this is a double-edged sword because on one hand, I think most people have some kind of trauma from childhood or, you know, even adolescence or adulthood. And I think that trauma can hold us back in many regards. A lot of our struggles in life can be rooted in our trauma. So there's certainly a benefit to understanding our trauma, but at the same time, and I noticed this here, when people focus on their trauma too much, it almost becomes a larger part of them. And I could even see a case to be made that in some instances, you're better off ignoring your trauma than making it a part of your identity. Because a lot of people out here, they're constantly talking about their trauma this, trauma that. And I don't mean this in any way to like delegitimize their trauma. I think it's very real. It's more a question is, does making it a focal point of your life help you cure it, or does it just bring it front and center and make it more present? I think there's an interesting balance that needs to be found here. And, you know, we've had a trauma specialist on the show a few times, Brad Kramer, awesome dude. So maybe we'll get him back on to talk about that, because it is, and Brad, if you're watching this, feel free to let us know in the comments what you think about this. But to what extent should we focus on our trauma without making it a focal part of our identity, making it worse than what it would be had we to just like ignore it and live life?